back to Timeless Topics. In this episode, we started out talking about what advice we would give new nurses and somehow found our way to saviorism, bias, and how to have difficult conversations. If some of these topics are new to you, we invite you to reflect on what they bring up and reach out for resources if you need to. We're so grateful that you are here with us. Let's jump into the conversation.
Tell me what advice you would have for a nursing student who says to you, I want to work in the NICU. What advice would you give that brand new, eager, so excited to do this experience? What would you tell them? If you had someone that could go back and tell you before you graduated from nursing school?
The first thing that comes to my mind is to embrace being humble. And if you don't know how to be humble, you might want to go ahead and start learning that now before you start applying to jobs. Because the one thing I think I've learned over and over again as a NICU nurse and NICU educator is that by far, we as the professionals are 1000% not in charge of that NICU. I have never been humbled quicker than by somebody's baby who weighs 380 grams. And if you let them, they will teach you way more than anybody can. I don't care what professor you have or instructor, what book you read, what articles you read. It's listening to what the human in that bed is telling you they are interested in doing. Because sometimes they just ain't about it. You might have a very well laid out plan and they'll be like, yeah, not today, ain't feeling it, not gonna happen. Or are capable of doing, because they might be like, that sounds like a great plan, but I also cannot do it, right? Like I have restrictions that I don't know about, you might not know about, but here we are, right? In a land of not being able to do it. And I think a lot of medicine is built on hubris and this idea that there's expertise on this side of it. But I think the NICU is somewhat unique in the way that if you're going to be good at it, you have to be willing, like, are comfortable with the fact that you're not going to know everything and that those patients and those families are going to teach you more than almost anybody else could if you're able to attune to their frequency and listen to them.
That's so
I like that.
beautifully stated and wise.
Yes.
I had a thought when you asked that question, Trace, of my first, it wasn't my very first day in a NICU. I had separated from the service, but it was my first day in a NICU in a civilian hospital. And I immediately went back to that night shift where if I could have told that nurse, me, anything, I would have said, stay grounded in your values. Just stay grounded in your values, because it was very quick, even though I had a little bit of experience. I mean, I didn't have years of experience in a NICU. I think I had maybe one when I was in the service, and then I went into the civilian. And my colleagues were all about, this is how we do it here. And I had never really lived in that kind of a world before. And this might be the myth of the golden age, you know, how you rewind the tape and you go, you know, you think it was way better back then. Not necessarily true, but I was really I felt assaulted with this wall of stubbornness, no curiosity. And so I found myself kind of compromising on things that I wouldn't have usually done if I was back in my original environment. Um, and it took me a little while. It was almost like kind of head down kind of a phenomenon, and figuring out, all right, who are the power players here? Because I need to figure out how to navigate this new scene. Um, but I mentioned the values because the values always kept the baby and family front and center. And so I kind of waffled initially. I did find my way back, but I think that would be something also to tell a brand new nurse, particularly a brand new nurse, right? Because I think they're fresh. The dew is still on the petals, you know. I mean, with values and vision and all of that. Um, this the word that popped up was naivete, but that it's not it's not naivete in a negative way. I think, it's that authenticity, that real reason why we went into this field in the first place. Try not to lose that. You might have to tuck it into a back pocket for a little while, but don't let the blush off the rose, you know?
I like that too. Because I
What about
think I
you?
would say probably something, a combination of both of your answers, right? I think, yes, don't forget the why behind whatever you're doing, right? Because I think all of us, or and a lot of us, most of us, probably went into this career with best intentions, right? Remember way back when, I don't even know if they still do this now, but having to write the essay for why do you want to be in blah blah blah, right? And everyone always said, I want to help people, right? And I do think that underlying that is probably a large percentage of people's underlying thoughts of that. But when you get into this field and all of the things start coming at you, all of the administrative things that you are tasked with doing, all of the nonsense yearly credentialing aspects that you have to do, and just in general, the fact that this is a hard field. Medicine, nursing, anything that is assisting the public right now, I think is a really difficult field. And so you have to remember why you did this. It's not just about the paycheck, because there's many a shift that that paycheck does not equal what your body has gone through, what your mind has gone through, what your heart has gone through.
Mhm.
So you have to step back and say, yes, that's going to pay my mortgage and my card note, but it's not going to heal me, right? But remembering why we're doing what we're doing may actually help heal a little bit. Um, but also remembering, and that why is remembering who we're doing it for. And we're not doing it for ourselves, right? We're doing it for these babies and their families. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they have to take that child home. I told my students last week, we are very territorial and we walk in and we say, this is my baby. No, ma'am, it's not, right? It is not your baby. It never will be your baby.
Mhm.
And you need to respect your place in that family's and that family dynamic. And I do think that we have a place in the family dynamic, but it is for that family to decide where our place is, right? Because I can very easily say, I'm auntie. They may not want me to be auntie, right? I may just be a nice family friend. But so I think that we have to respect them in that standpoint. I wish someone had told me how impactful it could be to be in this role. And actually, I take that back because when I became a practitioner and I interviewed for my first job, one of the physicians did say something along those lines. My interview with him consisted of him telling me how important this role was and how influential this role was and what a place this role has in some families' journey and how we should respect that and honor that in everything that we do. And I still remember his words 25 plus years later because it is. And I wish that people could understand that part of it.
Kind of weaving just what you had said earlier too about humility that came in my head, Trace, when you were talking, but also the idea of altruism. Um, and there's this really cool read. I love reading basically anything by Joan Halifax. Um, and she wrote this book called Standing at the Edge, and she identified 8 edge states. And I can't remember all of them right now, but I do remember altruism because you had said about, like we go into it because we want to do good for others. But she said there's a shadow side, I mean, to all of these edge states, and there's a shadow side to altruism that actually can seriously undermine our best intentions. When you said, I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing this for you, that's an altruistic approach, that I'm in a giving mode. But when we work in environments that don't honor that, acknowledge that, and support, the recovery that is necessary to resolve some moral distress, moral injury, and come back, full again, you can start to feed your ego from the shadow side of altruism. I do this and I say it's because I want to really heal you and help you. But man, I'm getting a super rush and my dopamine is squirting, out the off the charts. And that feeds my ego and really be cautious of that. Like, I mean, that would be like a cautionary tale for the new nurses. You're going to bump up against it. I think it's just part of the human experience. But if you could kind of get a heads up about some of those things too, I mean, some of them you probably can't. You could lecture until the cows come home, and they're going to roll their eyes and they're going to go, "Oh yeah, she's out in left field without a glove," and until it bumps up, you bump up to it and you realize, holy mackerel, this is what's happening. Um, it's just part of the evolution. But I think there's so many moving parts that can sometimes derail even the kindest, most heart-centered person in moments, right? I mean, this isn't like a, you know, either or, but I think just as human beings who work in a system that actually thrives off of extraction, we're just as vulnerable as the babies and the families are as we're doing this good work in the system, because they want people that want to do this work, that really get off on the joy of serving others. And we can say, I'm not going to pay you that much because aren't you getting enough? You're not in this for the money. And, kind of all of those secondary phenomena that tend to marginalize, at least in my experience, professions that are very altruistic. And those professions tend to be female dominated. So just lots of other elements that can kind of corrupt even the purest of hearts who just came out of nursing school and is, crossing the threshold into their first nursing job. You don't want to hose them, but you want to help prepare them in some way that helps them never feel like they're alone. I mean, Jessi, you share a lot of really cool stories with your nursing students. And Trace, I've seen you, like when we were at the Fan Up conference, I mean, your students just kind of, they bounce around you like bubbles. So, I mean, that speaks to, the beautiful spirit that lives in you guys to maintain that relationship so that folks don't feel alone, don't feel, even in the most difficult of times. So maybe find your helpers. Tell the new nurses, look for the helpers. I don't know.
Yeah, I tell my new grads all the time, like, you're going to figure out who you can go to and who you can't. But I want you to remember that learning how to do something and learning how not to do something are both valuable lessons. So you will look around and be able to say, ooh, I don't want to handle things like this lady handled it because she made me feel terrible for asking a question, right? So when I get to a position, because they all balk, they're like, one day somebody's going to ask me a question. I was like, one day, sooner than you're ready for, they're going to look to you and be like, hey, you've been here longer than me. Do you know this? And you're going to go, oh no. But when that time is you get your opportunity, you will decide how to manage it based on how you were managed in these moments. And either you're going to be met with somebody who says, oh, maybe not so much, or let's look at it this way, or let's go look the policy together, or, go through that versus, God, you always ask me all these questions. You know nothing. Did that educator teach you anything? Right? You're going to know how to handle that because if you're able to keep a healthy connection to why you're here, right? Another thing I tell them constantly is to respect the role that they play in this family story, which is a chapter in a book that they never intended to write. Right. So you're walking in someone's worst nightmare in a lot of cases, even when there's good outcomes. So while, yes, the hope is that we find meaning in it because we will, but the story isn't about us and our meaning. So like to Tracey's point, I might want to be your auntie, but you might be like, you're a close acquaintance at best, ma'am. And you just have to accept that this is who you are, right? And know that you showed up with the intent you showed up with. You hopefully didn't have any impact that didn't align with your intent. And if there was a misstep, you learn from it and you take it to the next family. That's one way to answer that question. The other thing I was thinking when we were talking about this, and we could also talk about the white saviorism of white feminism and all of this, but I don't know if we're ready to get that spicy since we've already had a couple of spicy episodes. Again, well intended, but also coming from a different lens and an identity that might feed her first, if that you get what I'm saying.
But I do think that's an interesting conversation,
I
right?
agree.
Because I don't think that people really see that. or can be insightful enough to really appreciate that, right? And especially when you think about our patient population and some of the area. And I do sometimes sit back and look and say, from my side of maybe appearing more like some of the patients, it's like, look at these people in here saying how much they have helped the other side,
Mm.
right? Versus what can we do to support the other side to help themselves, right? And then why do we always have to be the ones going and fixing it,
Yeah.
right? Why can't we say, we're going to help elevate you to the point that you fix it? And I got your back and I will support you and I will give you whatever support you need. But at the end of the day, if I continue to do it for you, it's never going to make a dent, right? Because it's only going to go as far as the relationship between you and I. And then once either one of us is gone, whatever good we've done is gone.
Yeah.
But if I'm teaching you and then you're teaching the next generation and the next generation, that lives on, right? But I don't think we see it like that, unfortunately. And I think it goes back to what you were saying, Mary. It makes us feel good, right?
Mhm.
Because we're human beings.
Yeah.
It has to make you feel good when someone says to you, thank you so much for everything you've done.
Yeah.
You know, you did nothing but stand here,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
baby was gonna live no matter what I did, right?
Mhm.
But in the meantime, the family's like, thank you. We're really
Yeah.
appreciative. And I didn't do anything. But internally, it's like, oh, look at what I did.
Yeah. I think it's a really important topic. I really do. I mean, I think and hey, spice is us. We are the Spice Girls. I mean, I love that word. Um, and I think you don't know what you don't know. You know what I mean? Like if we continue to not talk about these situations, then we just are granting permission for them to perpetuate themselves. And I wanted to circle back, Trace, when you said about like it does feel good. It does feel good. And sometimes that um, receipt of the good feeling, it sometimes isn't necessarily conscious, right? I mean, it kind of happens. And then as you said that, it made me wonder, like, so what's missing in my life that I'm going to extract, this beneficence or whatever out of someone else who's suffering, um, and get lost in it, right? I mean, again, it kind of comes back to those shadow sides, and I think the more we can start peeling back the layers and saying that, everybody is hurting, that I think that's a fair statement. On the planet, everybody is hurting in their own way. I think that's important to notice, but it's not an excuse. Because if I have chosen this path to be a healer, I'm okay. I can sit in my office or kitchen or wherever and just wallow in my sorrow. But when I decide I'm coming to work and I'm crossing that threshold, I have to put my stuff in the garage or wherever the hell you want to put it in your locker, and I have to show up intentionally, present and aware that I am here for you. And that whole thing about me doing for you to get those dopamine hits is very, very selfish. Remember that expression? I think it's like a Bible thing or something about you can feed a man fish for a day, but if you teach him to fish, he eats for the rest of his life. I think they say it better than that. But like, I think we at least me, I I practiced my nursing pretty much in a default mode. I never showed up to work to hurt anybody. I mean, that was never on my radar. But I'm sure people were hurt. But I wasn't aware of, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't aware of my whiteness. I wasn't aware of that as a potential point of harm for someone else, And I think it's important. Yes, does it feel uncomfortable? Heck yeah, But I mean, that's part of life, I mean, and growing up and really leaning into the full breadth of who I am. is an important aspect for my growth to be a better healer, to show up better for another human being. But we don't have these conversations. We don't, kind of coming back to where we always often do touchstones, education, like even undergraduate education, and not even undergrad. Like, let's rewind the tape. High school education. I mean, these young adults. I mean, you could go all the way back down to kindergarten, but the kindergarten people, they have it. They know. It just gets squeezed out of them after that. So, I mean, really helping infuse our education systems with an awareness, right? Of the diversity of who we are, and that's awesome. By the time you're a grown up and you're a professional, you are as far away from your most authentic wisdom and most authentic self as you could ever possibly be. And then it's just taboo to, we don't talk about that.
So here would be my question then.
Mm.
And I'm just asking this again, the confines of this is a safe space. We can have these dialogues, and this is what we're here for. If I personally felt that there was someone that was close to me, someone that I felt comfortable with, who was kind of in this vein of savior complex for whatever reason, right? And so just for ease of conversation, Mary, let's say I came to you and said, Mary, I want to have a conversation because we've been working together for a minute now, and it feels like sometimes this is this savior complex. Like, I'm going to go in and I'm going to fix this population. And
Yeah.
it makes me feel really uncomfortable. One, how do you have that conversation? How do you even say that without being offensive? And two, should you care if you're being offensive? And is part of my concern about being offensive a result of lifelong systemic racism? And I'm worried
Yeah.
that I'm going to upset someone versus just being able to walk into a setting and say, I don't like that, right? What you said was not okay, right? That was not appropriate. Because I don't think that we know how to do that. And I don't think that people know how to take it either,
Yeah.
right? And it's hard when someone tells you that you have been offensive, discriminatory,
Mhm.
biased, inappropriate.
Yeah.
You have to take it to heart, right? I mean, you have to take a second when it's like, oh, that hurt.
Yeah.
But I don't think that we then know how to come back and say, okay, that hurt, but it was true and it was accurate. And even if it was only accurate for that one person, it was accurate.
Yeah.
And now what?
So, I was viciously nodding my head because yes, right? Like that's why you care about being perceived as anything but docile, right? Because we know that everything else has been weaponized. I will shock absolutely zero people, but I am fully on board with allowing or maybe inviting people to feel uncomfortable and still survive, right? I do think an element of consent or a heads up helps. So sometimes I will say, like, oh, are you open to feedback about that? And now sometimes that alone will tell you, like, the way they respond will be like, oh, no, you're not. Okay. But it gives you a chance because sometimes the answer is no immediate, like initially, and then they might come back and be like, well, what was the feedback going to be about? And then you can kind of go from there because we're trained as healthcare providers specifically to like be open to feedback about our performance, right? Even when it's not given from a place of kindness or even appropriateness, right? Because sometimes the way we talk to each other is truly wild. But we're trained to just suck it up, right? You want to be better, right? Well, then you need to listen to him because he wrote 10 papers about this. So it's just kind of recognizing like, all right, cool. I understand that they might be a subject matter expert. Let me figure out how to receive feedback from them. But maybe that person also needs to figure out how to give feedback. Because this was a topic that we talked about a long time ago about talking about like being able to give and receive feedback because it's a skill in and of itself. because it's very easy to get stuck in your feelings and decide that someone else across from you is just the meanest person in the entire world, and there's some big fat meanie who nobody ever taught them to be kind, and they just don't like you because you're different from them. When that's usually not the full story, you know? But being able to say, hey, again, just for ease of conversation, like, hey, Mary, can we maybe talk for a second? Do you have a second about what, that situation with that family? And you could be like, oh, yeah, because sometimes you'll come into it thinking, like, oh, yeah, well, that, I mean, they were just so sweet. Like, how kind of them to say those things about me. Like, I'm just here doing my job. And they were so sweet to acknowledge that. They brought those cookies. They were delicious. Did you get one? And you just want to be like, I did get a cookie and they were delicious. It was very kind of them to do. But have you thought about, why they were doing that? Like, could you think, introducing topics of the fawn response, introducing topics of the hierarchy that exists that you might not believe in or have built, but here you are functioning in it, right? So being able to understand, thank you for offering to give me a gift or to give me a gift card or whatever, but like, it's really just not appropriate. Like, I'm not in this for that. I'm in this to hopefully help families have good outcomes. So if you're telling me that that's what happened, then I did my job, right? And sometimes I think people have to see that role modeled before they can figure out how to apply it.
Yeah.
Because it's so much easier to just be like, I mean, I really am the world's best nurse. Thank you so much for letting me know. And now everybody else knows it too because you brought me cookies.
Yeah. It's such a weird place to kind of gradually begin to see what really is happening. Let me just tell you this little story. And this is kind of like, this sounds dramatic, okay, but I'm still gonna use this word, like this awakening process, all right? Awakening to my own racism has been really important. And I now see that I still make mistakes, that I still, have these, pockets of where I'm not paying attention. But it doesn't make me contract. It makes me be even more curious, and it helps me be more aware of what's happening around me. So here's the story. So I forget why I was down in Atlanta, Georgia. Maybe I was flying through something, or but I was at the airport in Atlanta, and it's a psycho, right? It's just a huge, and so I was, I don't know if I think I was moving. I was going to the bathroom, and then I was going to get back, in line or something like that. And so you know how you just toddling around, you're not paying attention, or you're in your own head. I go into this bathroom, and there was the bathroom attendant person. She was a woman of color, and my goodness, she was so sweet. Okay, I mean, I'm just going to tell you like my impressions, right? She was super, super friendly. Like I'd never met anybody that's friendly. I mean, and I know Southern people are wicked friendly, but she was just like over the top and kind and holding the door for people and let me go in there and wipe that down for you and I started to like see her through a different lens, and I started to wonder, like, and I hope this is okay, I started to wonder, is she acting this way not because she's not a kind person, but because she knows, it feels like in her bones know, like not like bone knowing of what's the best way to hold on to this job and navigate, because there was more white women in that bathroom. And I mean, than there were black women. And she was lovely. She was so kind and chatty and smiling to me and having a few words with me and stuff like that. And so it was lovely, but inside my head, it was also making my heart hurt a little bit. Like, is this what I've been missing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, not, in seeing and interpreting behaviors in ways that before I was blinded because of my racism.
I mean, but
I think,
that story and your uncomfortableness telling it is the work, right? Is
Yes.
recognizing that I don't, ooh, this is bad. I shouldn't say this because I've been socialized to believe that I shouldn't believe this, but I see it and I feel it with my own brain and my heart and my eyes.
Yeah.
So I know it's real, but it's counter to everything. It's the same thing that Tracey was talking about, right? Like I'm concerned with being disruptive, so I'm just gonna feel uncomfortable about it, or I'm gonna embrace the disruptiveness of it, right? But like it's this systematic upbringing of oppression from multiple lenses, talking about intersectionality, right? That's what we have to get comfortable looking at, right?
Yeah.
So that we can kind of take the glasses off and be like, they fooled all of us, into thinking that this is the only way that we can have orderly society, orderly for whom? Who is benefiting?
Yeah.
Well, and you have to sit with someone who is on the other side to have the conversation, right? Because I would argue that if you were in a group of people who were only like you, right? You would never have the conversation about code switching, right? You
Yeah.
would never have the conversation of having to pause and think about what you're saying so that you're not the angry Black woman, right? And I would have to think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would have to think that it now makes you even look at me differently, right? Like I would argue that when we sat together at FANNP last year, you
Mhm.
never would have noticed the tiny pauses. You never would have noticed the shift in my tone, right? But
Yeah.
now that we've spent more time on a human woman to woman basis,
Yep.
next year at FANNP, you'll pick up on those tiny things, right? You
Yeah.
will sense that level of discomfort when certain people enter the circle, and you will see that tiny shift in me because now you know who I am as a person,
Yeah.
right? Not just who I am by name or by profession or by whatever. And that's what makes the difference, right? Because I have friends and colleagues that know me well enough that they will put a hand on my knee and just pat, right? And it's like, oh, you saw that shift. You saw what's about to happen. And it's like, uh-huh, right? Or will be able to come to me and say, are you okay? Because I saw what just happened. And then there are others that are still so blind
Yeah.
that they will continue on and they will be the main ones perpetuating whatever the problem is, right? And they will just keep moving and they will never catch it. But that's because they've never talked to me
Yeah.
as a person. They've talked to me as Tracey, the NNP, right? And they don't know who I am when I stop and say, that really made me uncomfortable, but I couldn't just stop and say, yo, hey, dog, right? I had to take a second and say, excuse me, what was just said was highly offensive to some people. And even then, I'm never going to say that bothered me.
Yeah.
I'm going to sugarcoat it to say that may have been offensive. That could be considered. When
Yeah.
in actuality, what I want to say is you were dead wrong.
Yeah.
But I can't say that.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe I should. I'm not there yet. I'm still working on myself for that part. Because there are some situations where I do recognize that I need to be stronger and step out and say, that was dead wrong.
Yeah.
And racist, biased, discriminatory, wrong, just wrong. And I'm not there yet, but working on it.
To me, that's where the like ally versus accomplice kind of mindset comes in, right? Because an ally will be like, oh, girl, yeah, that was wrong, but let you take the heat for saying it, right? Versus an accomplice is like, no, you don't talk like that, right? And leverage privilege to be able to promote, hopefully, awareness at first, right, of the inappropriateness of something through a lens of privilege, right? Because they can fire back at me, but in the end of the day, through all the lenses that you look at systematically, I still, unfortunately, am going to come out okay, right? Now, you might not like me as a person, but that's okay. I'm in enough therapy that that's all right. You can be mad. But it takes a certain amount of like self-awareness to be able to decide, am I going to ride to the point of being an accomplice where it's like, yeah, I'm going to go down on this fight for you? Or am I just going to perform the ally role in saying, yeah, I'm going to wear a bracelet that says Black Lives Matter. I'm going to wear a bracelet that says that you're safe with me. Or I'm going to wear this trans flag on, on my badge to show that this is a signal that you're safe. But are you really, Or is this just a signal to other people that, yeah, I'm on the right side and you're not? But action matters with that, right? Like the intersection of being able to take the intent and make it into action that actually promotes safety, or at least invites safety, right? Because someone's not safe just because you announce it, but invites for safety to be built. That's where the work is. But that's what makes it the hardest to do, because it is not a read one book or flip a light switch, listen to one podcast and be like, I did it. I am woke and we are good, right? Like it's being able to reflect on past experiences, reflect on current experiences, sit and think with your own biases, implicit, explicit, and all the other forms, right? To be able to say, ooh, that did not align with my values, right? To call back what Mary had said before. So I need to then decide, what do I need to do differently to either repair the impact of what happened that didn't align with values, or at minimum, take this into the next situation so I can make sure this malalignment doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
But that work is not easy. It's much easier to play into these systems. That's why they're here, right? Because it's convenient to just be a part of a system rather than trying to be a counter to that system.
But I think that's why we haven't really seen any real impact and change, right? Like, how long have we been talking about implicit bias in the NICU? Right? Like, it seems like forever. And it seems like everybody now has something that they talk about it and they address it and they whatever. But as far as I know, the numbers aren't changing, right? Those babies in that certain population group are still dying faster. They still have worse outcomes. So tell me what we're doing wrong.
Yeah.
As you said, we're talking about it. We're reading the book. We're doing the test.
CBLs.
But are we really stepping up to the plate, calling people when things are wrong? Are we just saying, oh, y'all saw that? Yeah, I saw it. But who checked that doctor on what she just said?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
We just all talked about her behind her back, but nobody called her in that moment and said, ma'am, that was so offensive what you just said.
Yeah.
Now, is that going to make a difference? I still don't know, right? Because she's probably still going to do what she's going to do. She's going to be who she's going to be. Hypothetically, she. I just know more she's. So that's why I'm saying she, right? But it just, it is so infuriating sometimes, because it's like, we're doing the work, but are we really? And I love the conversations of accomplice versus ally, right? Because I can tell you, a lot of people I know, I'd be like, yeah, you're an ally, I appreciate that. But when it comes time for me to hide that body, you're not there.
Yeah.
Because you're like, well, wait a minute. That could be traced back to my house, right? Yeah, it definitely could be. You prepared to go down for me like that? I don't think so. And again, it's human nature, right? I can't fault people when they say, I have to protect me, my children, my house. I get it. But if we're really going to do the work and we're really going to make that change, sometimes we realize that when your house get bombed, mine might get bombed too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think one of the struggles is that we've continued to think of this as an individual responsibility, and it's not an individual responsibility. It's a collective responsibility. But if we keep focusing on the individual, then we keep the divides going, right? We keep all the fences up, and then everybody's just, like covering their own butt. They're just worried about themselves. And so I think that's one of the big issues. I did really enjoy the Freeman paper from the group over here in Beth Israel in Boston that created that health racial justice equity assessment tool for QI initiatives, because they called that out and said, we're not going to change this bias through CBLs and individual responsibilities. It's a collective thing. So I think we're moving glacially slow pace. But I also wanted to circle back too on the sensing piece of it, Trace. You had said about not everybody sees when you do the code shift thing. because it's not a cognitive phenomenon. It is totally 100% brainstem function. Am I safe or am I not? And I think that woman, the bathroom attendant, I mean, she was inundated with all of her work, and she just knew it was safer to feel to notice that she was not safe. That was the safer thing to do. And for yourself, it's the same thing. You just shift when you don't feel safe. It might be the subtlest thing, but your body knows. Why does your body know? Just, from forever, of always having to worry about being safe and stuff. And so I think, talking about these things in these kinds of forums is wicked important, and I know you kind of opened it up just with the savior thing too. And that I mean that's so freaking insidious. People thinking that they're white women, particularly, I don't know about guys, but thinking that you're the savior of a situation. And it's again, it kind of comes back to that altruism and the shady side of altruism, um, and how it can feel good, but how incredibly disempowering it is at the end of the day for for the folks that you're serving, that especially when they don't look like you, because you do get bonus points, for helping them, for saving them from the situation. And it's not even a situation. I don't know, half the time I don't know what the heck you're saving them from, because their life goes on, and unless you're doing anything meaningful and systemic, you ain't doing anything. So your delusions of saviorship are delusional. So, but again, calling it out, I mean, a lot of these terms, it's a new lexicon for me. It's an important lexicon. But if we don't start talking about this publicly, if we don't start publishing papers that talk about all of the different words that we use that perpetuate racism, perpetuate division, perpetuate, all of the dark side, all the shadow side of what it is to be a human being, then it ain't going to get better anytime soon either. So I welcome these spicy conversations. Even, even feeling uncomfortable, like knowing that my discomfort is part of my growth, and if that helps me show up in a better way, as a better version of who I get to be in this world, then okay. I'm not saying everybody's going to be like that. And I think asking permission, can I have a conversation with you? Is a helpful segue. But it is important to role play that. And maybe we come back to the new nurse and say, this isn't just about you following orders on a sheet, on a form. This is about you showing up to people's lives. And a lot of these lives don't look like yours. And grounding yourself in that humility and stuff to honor that.
So when you have these opportunities where you know that as long as you've been in neonatology, just as well as I do, that when you look around
Oh, yeah.
the table is very homogeneous,
Yes.
right? But
Yes.
when you say, I'm bringing somebody else to the table, and just your vote of confidence already gives me that in. Now, should I need that in? No, but that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
It's just what it is, right? And then you sit back and you say, yeah, I don't need to do anything else because this person can prove themselves, right? Again, not that I should have to prove, but
Right.
we all know that that's how it works. But that in of itself is huge, huge, right? And that's not beating anybody over the head. That's just you being you, saying this person knows exactly what they're talking about. They have something to bring to the table. So I'm going to get them a place at the table, and I'm going to allow whatever I've earned over the years to help me get them a place at the table. And then I sit back and be like, go, right?
Right.
And that person then brings somebody else to the table. And that's how we make those changes, right? So just doing that is massive. And I don't think people understand how massive that can be, right? And I think that that is not white savior at all, because again, it goes back to you're not fishing for me.
No.
You're right. You're like, you're fishing now. You're just in the boat with us. So you go ahead and you fish. And it's like fishing, baby. I got it. right? So that to me is a big impact.
Yeah, it's the sharing of privilege that you didn't earn, right? And saying that I can walk in a room and someone's going to default to me, but what I can do with that is I can either go, oh yeah, this is what I agree and blah blah blah, and be factually correct, right? Or I could say, hey, I'm going to pitch the conversation to her.
Yeah.
Because that's taking the mic and then saying, I'm not the best person to hold it.
Yeah.
Let me give it over here. Because it also sends message to other people that that's my girl. So watch what you say, right? So if you respect me, then by default, you need to respect her, right? Or else this is no longer going to be a good relationship for us. And to be honest, this is what white men have been doing forever. This is how these systems were built,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
We just have to learn how to take it back. But it's not comfortable doing it because it's much easier to let those powers that be the powers that be, right?
Yeah.
But that power has to be taken, right? And then shared and broken down into all the different levels so that we can amplify all the different levels of diversity that needs to be amplified in healthcare and the greater systems and anything, right? Because no one person of any homogenous, no matter how you slice it, whatever perspective, is ever going to make a solution that benefits everybody. It has to be diverse if it's going to work.
Timeless Topics is Jessi Barnes, Tracey Bell, and Mary Coughlin. It is produced by Jessi Barnes and music from Carlos Bell. The thoughts and opinions shared here are those of the individual speakers and do not reflect the official policy or position for any of the speakers' employers or any other affiliated individual or entity.